Hi friends. Don't have much time for this intro, but I'm going to try and explain it as best I can. For those of you who don't know, I'm an actor, primarily musical theater. I'm currently in the middle of a run of Stephen Sondheim's company here in Vancouver. It has been an amazing run so far and we are officially sold out, so if you live here and you missed out, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And for this particular production, we are setting it in the era that it was originally written in, which is 1969. It's a really cool era, particularly makeup was really cool in this era. It was a time of experimentation, it was a time of creativity and artistry and really playing with the form. So for my makeup for the show, I really decided to delve right into the time period and try and get as close to accurate as humanly possible. But I figured it would also be helpful for anyone who's looking to go a little retro this Halloween season. This look can be used for anywhere between hippie to mod to 60s housewife. I think it's super versatile and it is just very period, especially if you pair it with a cute little wig like this, styled by the one and only Donnie Tajani. Go follow him on Instagram for all of your costuming and wig needs. So if you want to know how I got to this retro inspired place, then I guess you're gonna have to keep on watching. Let's get started. I don't have an unlimited amount of time today. I actually am going to the show that I'm doing this makeup for right after this, so I have to keep it rolling. So I'm going to talk about how I created this look as I am throwing on my base. I've done the same base probably for the last like 10 videos. I haven't changed up this routine an awful lot just because it works. And when it works, why bother? So while I'm priming and doing my foundation, let's just talk about makeup in 1969. I found a lot of my inspiration on Pinterest, obviously. I mean, Pinterest is like the perfect place to go when you need something very specific. There was just a cornucopia of vintage makeup ads from the late 60s, early 70s. And they were absolutely spectacular. Like, I knew it was a time where makeup was starting to become something more creative, more artistic, but I also didn't realize just how experimental makeup became for women in particular. And it was really, really cool to see how people really started to express themselves with makeup, with eyeshadow in particular, which is why this look is such an eyeshadow heavy look. And by the way, if you're wondering what I am using, all of my products are always listed in the description box down below. By the way, I've fallen back in love with the Tacha silk canvas. Once I figured out how to actually use it properly, it really does work like a charm on the T-zone. Anyway, so I'm just pressing that into my skin right now because 3 primers is enough, right? Anyway, there was no one way to go about doing your makeup. As far as color palette goes and as far as certain techniques go, there was definitely trends, but inside all of that, there was also a lot of experimentation and creativity, which is why it's so much fun doing the research for this look in particular. I just felt like I could kind of just pick and choose things that I liked from each look that I saw and then put it in a color palette that would be appropriate for this show. What I found interesting is that everything was centered around eyeshadow and eye looks. All the looks I saw were definitely eyeshadow forward, not skin focused really, in the way of like there was not a whole lot of heavy contouring or bronzing. As I'm saying this as I'm piling on cream bronzer, but the reason it's so heavy is because I'm actually laying this down underneath a thin layer of foundation, so it might look really heavy and crazy right now, but just wait. I will show you how it becomes a very natural effect. I do my best to not get too heavy-handed with the bronzer in this look, even though that's kind of my MO. I also dial it back a bit on the concealer, on the foundation itself, because I don't think it was a thing that was really done unless you were probably modeling or doing some sort of editorial or being in an advertisement. The average person wasn't heavily contouring and highlighting. There's a lot of innovation happening in the form of liquid eyeliners, eyeshadow palettes, and it was all about brightening the eyes and making them appear bigger, wider. Well, I mean, we've all seen the iconic Twiggy I think people immediately, when they hear 1960s makeup, they think of her. I mean, which is true. She definitely did make the sort of doe-eyed, wide-eyed, round-eyed look very popular. But there were other things being played with too for the time, like definitely very experimental and not at all natural or organic. It was a lot of playing around with the architecture of an eye, which I found really inspiring. And I know it looks crazy now. I promise it'll look more natural in a second. And because the space we're performing in for this show is so intimate, people are very close to you and they can see pretty much everything that's going on. So I didn't want to look like I was wearing a full mask, which is why this contouring technique really comes in handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the last dregs of my favorite concealer at the moment, which is the Flower Light Illusion Concealer. I love this concealer so much, but there was definitely not enough product in the component for me. I ran out so fast. I'm gonna try and not do too much. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my Catrice Liquid Camouflage Concealer in that sort of more brighter tone, and I'll do a little dab of that here and there to highlight. I like the idea of blending all of the face products in at once. That way you use less product and you're not piling on top of each layer. And I'm using less foundation because of it. So I'm just using a pump and a half. I'm very lightly dotting that in the areas where I'll want the most coverage, in the places that I have the most discoloration and redness, but avoiding the areas that I already have product down. And you think you need more than that, but you really don't. And then I take my trusty Pro 4F, which is the Furless It's Likely Makeup collab brush, and really with a quick hand lightly buff all that together. And you'll see just how much that bronzer blends in and disappears and becomes a natural looking contour. That's why you don't want to go directly over it with foundation. You want to just blend the foundation into the bronzer that's already on your skin. And that way it doesn't look too cakey. And you just look naturally chiseled, especially in the nose area, because for this look I skip most of my contouring, including the nose, because it just doesn't look natural up close. But this tends to be easier to trick the eye with. Once you figure out your face shape and the things you want to enhance or pull back, this technique is just really fun. And of course you can play it up or dial it back as much as you want. And because it's all creams and liquids, you have time to play and fix and perfect before you set everything. I have a little excess foundation on the back of my hand, so I'm just gonna pick that up with my brush and tap in the areas that I think need a little bit more, like right around my nose, my chin. At this point, I usually take a tad a bit more of the brightening concealer and just dot away in the areas that need just a tiny bit more, and don't go too ham. And then just buff that in with the same brush. Before any of this creases, I like to take my damp sponge and really press the powder into the areas where I know my foundation usually moves around a lot. And then with a big old fluffy brush, I like to take a loose setting powder and lightly powder the rest of the face, because I don't need as much in the areas that I'm especially dry in. Just something to make sure nothing moves around too much. And then I more or less just dust away the bake almost right away. It doesn't need to be hanging around for very long. And then I just stamp and fluff some more powder around the rest of the face, just so that nothing is sticky. Don't forget to powder the neck, it's super important. But I really love how the Silk Canvas Primer just smooths out that entire area and makes it last all day in the T-zone. Like, I barely have to touch up. That is basically the routine I use pretty much 100% of the time now, because it is really fast and easy, and it doesn't leave me looking super caked on with makeup, which is something that I am prone to doing. I have the Too Much gene. I also have the Perfectionist gene, so sometimes it's nice to just sit back, have the mirror a little bit farther away from the face, and just sort of slap it on and hope for the best. And you don't even have to do any further contouring with this. You can see that everything's just sort of very lightly, almost undetectably chiseled. However, I can't keep away from the bronzer entirely. I use a nice natural one with a bit of a glow to it. You know. And this time I'm just going to very lightly, without too much product, just tap in and swirl just ever so slightly onto the perimeter of my face. I know I always go way too ham with the bronzer, but it's because I can't help myself. For this look, I just want a kiss of warmth. And you know, I just want to look like I have better bone structure than I actually have. When we took the photos, I just noticed like how in photographs up close, especially not in this lighting where it's like very bright and very like face on, from the side, being in an intimate space that's not just directly like proscenium can look a little bit odd. So I'm trying desperately to just keep it really soft, no harsh lines, and fairly natural. Although that's really hard for me to do. Probably too much already. And of course hit the forehead. I'm wearing a wig in the show, so it's not super important. And it's a hard front wig with bangs, so it's not like I don't need to blend in the hairline or anything, which is such a relief. Just a little dash on the tip of the nose, along the sides. And on camera, it still looks crazy. It really does. But in person, it looks like way less than I normally wear. I promise, I promise. Now, what was very era appropriate was a nice light bright blush. They loved their pastel tones, loved brightening, and they loved a good pink blush. I'm gonna use this nice like dolly pink blush that I have in here. It's called Exhilarating. It's from the Blush Bazaar, but you can probably dupe that pretty easily. It's just like a Barbie pink blush. And I just hit right onto the apples. And don't go too far out that way, and don't go too far underneath the eye. I usually like to take my blush really, really high up onto the cheekbone, but for the air, I think you're really just supposed to mimic a truly naturally flushed cheek. And normally with the eyeshadow that I'm using, I would pair it with a more peachy blush, but not really quite the era. And also, there's no highlighter. RIP. In lieu of highlighter, I'm just going to try and create a more natural, glowy look that doesn't look too fake or too blingy by using Milani Big Blush. Luminoso is the best. I don't know what else to tell you. If you're tired of hearing about it, I'm sorry. And because we are not going in with highlighter, we're going to sort of liberally apply this to the apples of the cheeks and up into the temple. You can see that it's not super blingy highlight. It's just a nice, naturally peachy, creamy glow. I like hitting it right in the apple of the cheek just because when you smile and it catches the light, it's just this beautiful, youthful touch. And of course, this is a bit of a fudge too, because I don't think shimmery blushes were even a thing. Anything that was frosty or shimmery or metallic was in the lips actually, which I found really interesting. They loved a good frosty pink lip. And now I understand where the early 2000s pulled it from, which I find really interesting because it just seems so modern to me. Virtually nothing else in this era was shimmery. Most eyeshadows were quite matte. So for the face, this is it. I do brows last in this look just because it's easier for me for some reason. I'm just gonna clean off my lips because in this look, I don't wear any lipstick. Mostly because I have to kiss someone in the show and I don't want to get lipstick all over their face. Also, I didn't want to go in with a heavy liquid lipstick that was transfer proof just because it probably would look bad from that close proximity, and also because it was not era appropriate. So I just forego lipstick. I just do a little touch of balm, and then I go on top of that with something that I've been really loving ever since I bought it. It was the Tarte Lip Quenchers in the shade Buff, and it's like the perfect combination of just a balm with a hint of shine and color. I'm almost at the very bitter end. It's minty, it's refreshing, it's glidey, it's balmy, not in any way sticky or gloppy. So now that the base is done, we're gonna get right into the nitty gritty of the eyeshadow, which is mostly where the complexity lies in this era of makeup. So I'm gonna zoom you guys in and we will get started. See how this looks really nice up close? Which is what this whole show is, it's very up close. As I was talking about before, the late 60s were big on matte eyeshadows, pastel colors, and for the most part, graphic shapes. What stuck out to me was that I was seeing a lot of what looked like very cut creases. And this was also the era that people started to really obsess over shiny liquid liner. And of course, that is kind of a faux pas these days. Everyone wants to keep it super matte with their liquid liners, but at the time it was very innovative and it was super trendy. The other trends that were going around were shapes that weren't necessarily winged out or lifted. A lot of the shapes you saw were focusing very much on keeping the eyes very round, very doll-like, very downturned, at the outer corners, almost puppy-like, what we would call puppy liner now. And I latched onto that because I definitely have the right eye shape for that look. And of course you still saw things like smoky eyes and different color palettes like in more earth tones. So I tried 1 or 2 different color schemes before landing on the blue. Blue is the one that stuck because it worked with my costume, it worked with the color palette of the show, and it stood out the most. And it felt the most 60s to me. So I'm going to stop talking. It's not the easiest eyeshadow look, I will give you that. But I will show you how I do it in the most quick and dirty way possible because I don't give myself a whole lot of time to do this look. I use 4 eyeshadow brushes. 1 tiny pencil brush, 1 slightly stubby smudgy brush, 1 fluffy blending brush, and 1 flat crease brush. And before we do any eyeshadow, we are just going to prime. I just use MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot because it's what I have right now at the moment. It's what I like. And it is the one that keeps my lids the most crease proof. I've noticed that the older I get, the more my lids will just really crease up and I don't even notice until it's too late. So the character I play is someone who is young, fresh, very, for the time, forward-thinking, slightly alternative. So I wanted that to come through in this eyeshadow look. So the way we normally do cut creases right now is blending all your eyeshadows in the crease and then cutting out the shape that you need with concealer and a flat brush. However, I don't have time for that bullshit, and it's not going to be the most precise method, but it works. And primarily for this look, I'm using all sugar pill shadows. They are easy to blend, they have terrific color payoff, and the blue can't be beat. So I'm mostly working in this corner here. I'm going to be using Kimchi, Velocity, and Taco. That's it. So making sure there are no creases, I'm going right into Velocity, which is that dark blue, on this pencil brush, and we're going to very quickly sketch the crease. So this is where you really create the eye shape that you want. I go above my natural crease. As you can see, if I'm looking forward, my natural crease is right tucked in there, and I just go like a millimeter above it. Only because when you look forward, you want to be able to see all of the work that you did. And then you don't want it to be hidden right directly into your crease. That goes double for people with hooded eyelids. So the shape that I'm trying to create is something very rounded, not at all lifted. It's all about big, round puppy dog eyes. But at the very end here, we do a tiny little flick like that. And that's it. That's as winged out as it gets. Just that little flick, and it's way lower than you normally would put a flick. And then I'm just gonna repeat that a couple times just to get that really opaque and really deep, because we're gonna build outward from here. So this is the spot where you want the eyeshadow to be darkest. So that is step 1, done. Now we take this slightly chubbier brush that is good for smudging and blending, and I'm going to dip into a blend of mostly Kimchi, which is the lighter blue eyeshadow, and a little bit of Velocity, and tap sort of back and forth in between the 2 pans. And what I want to do with that blend is start to immediately tap over the line that we created to start creating a gradient. And I'm using stamping motions, just tapping it in to the blue line and blending it up and out. And that edge that you create, you can sort of buff away with the remaining shadow on the brush. This might take a little while to get a nice seamless blend. I mean, I'm not going for perfection here because no one's gonna care. Hopefully people will be distracted by my amazing talent. Now this may look a little bit rough, but don't worry, there's one final blending step to go. And if there's any patchiness, you can go in with a little bit of that darkest shade, tap, tap, tap it out. Last step you're gonna do is you're gonna take your nice fluffy blending brush, which is my M514, it's the one I use the most, dip right into Kimchi, which is the lighter blue shade, with a loaded brush, start buffing along the outer edge of the look and really just blowing it out. And that will create that nice, seamless, blown out edge. So it's interesting. I usually work in the opposite direction. When it comes to blending eyeshadow, I usually work the lightest shade first and then getting deeper and deeper into the crease. But this way, I don't know. I mean, for this look in particular, I just thought this was the most practical and I think it works the best. And it's the least mess. You can already kind of see the feel of the look starting to take shape here, which is always fun for me because the look really doesn't come together until almost the bitter end. So sometimes you just have to have a little bit of trust in yourself. And then I'm just taking whatever is left on that brush and just swiping it around, blending everything and making sure that there are no rough edges. And now we go in with Tacha, which is the white eyeshadow. And we're just going to essentially do a poor man's version of a cut crease. Just because this saves on time, the edge doesn't have to be super sharp. This is really purely for brightening the eye. This era was all about bright, open eyes. So as you can see, I'm just taking the edge of this brush and just cutting the crease along the edge that we already created with the blue and following it all the way to the edge there and winging it out, and then just sort of blending it down on the edge into the face. And you might have to layer this up a few times. It's hard to get opacity with a white matte eyeshadow. That's why I love Sugar Pills Taco so much. It is the whitest of the white. It does not crease, it does not budge. And even without a concealer, it does really stamp out a shape pretty easily. And you can kind of perfect the crease a little bit by cleaning up the edges with that white eyeshadow. And to be perfectly honest, I actually kind of like the softness of the line as opposed to the really sharp, crisp concealer line that you get. And the white eyeshadow really just elevates it into that extremely mod, very twiggy place. You can use a shimmer shade and you can use a metallic and you can use a concealer and you can cut the crease, but that just brings it to a really contemporary place. We're just going to finish up the lower lash line really quick. Going in with that nice smudgy brush, I'm going to go into Velocity first and really pack it under the lash line. I could have used black for this, which is normally what would have been used, would just be some black kohl liner. That would have been more area appropriate. I just like the cohesion of this much better, so I fudged that one a little bit too. And then what I do is I kind of just take the edge of the brush and stop right around where my upper lid meets my lower lid. And then I just sort of create a line that slopes downward from the lash line. And that creates that really puppy dog, doll-like eye look once I get the liner on, but we'll get there in a second. I'm going to take Kimchi and really buff out that edge with the lighter eyeshadow, just so that it matches the top a little bit better. And then for the inner corner, again, we're not going to do any shimmery eyeshadow because it just feels a bit too modern. I'm going to take Taco on a pencil brush and just tap that into the inner corner to create that brightness. Because otherwise I feel like the look looks unfinished, and this kind of helps marry everything together. So before I go on to do the other eye and zoom back out, let's do the liner. The liner kind of is the thing that cinches it and really cements it into the time period. What we're going to do is we're going to create the illusion that the eye is much wider in the center of the eye and actually tapers downward on the edges, which is very counterintuitive to what we do today. Usually we really love to elevate and lift the eye and wing it way out just to give us a little bit of a facelift, but the 60s were all about round shapes. And I don't have a vinyl liquid liner for this just because it's not my style and I didn't feel like picking up a whole brand new product just for one show. So I'm just going to use the liner that I always go with, and it's the NYX Epic ink liner because of its tip. That's what she said. But check out the precision that you can get off that brush. It is super fine, but it can also create a nice chunky line too. So what I'm going to initially do is just create the first pass, which is just lining the eye. And then what I do is I take the brush and wiggle it right into the lash line all the way down to the very outer corner. And I don't lift it, but I do wing it out and down to mirror the eyeshadow that we did. And that creates this really sloping line. And then what I'm going to start doing is building up the center of the liner to really round out the eye shape. So don't build it up too much on this corner. And it looks a bit wonky when you close your eye, but when you have the eyes open, it's a really lovely illusion. So when you close it, looks a bit weird, looks a bit blobby, but just make sure that you're creating the shape while your eye is open. Last thing I want to do before I leave you to put on liner and lashes and do the other eye on the other side, throwing some white into the lash line, and that will brighten even further. And for that I use the NYX Jumbo Pencil in the color Milk. I'm gonna go throw on some mascara, some lashes, and then we will come back and finish off the rest of the look. Okay, we're in medias res right now. While I'm waiting for my lash glue to dry, I'm actually gonna start my eyebrows. This usually saves me a little bit of time. And with these brows, I'm trying to go for a more natural effect, really fluffy. This time period favored a more natural looking brow, nothing too structured. I'm gonna do my best with what I have. First off, just coming through my brow hairs with a little bit of brow gel. This is Gimme brow. It has a little bit of tint, but it's still soft enough that it looks quite natural, not too spiky. And I'm just gonna brush all the hairs upward. And then what I wanna do is take my micro brow pencil. I use the Precisely My Brow by Benefit in the shade 4. And what I'm going to do, instead of creating a structured look, I'm going to start drawing in little hairs and then map out where I want the brow to live with little short hair strokes. Start lightly at first, and then from there start layering more hair strokes. They don't have to all be in line with each other. In fact, brows rarely are, so you can create a little bit of a staggered hair effect by bringing some more forward, some a little farther back. And try and just blend all that into your natural brow. This will be much easier if you have a full brow. If you have a full brow, you just need to use some brow gel, and that's the end of that. But if you're like me and you don't possess a real brow, this should do the trick. If it's a bit too harsh in some areas, just comb it out. I always use lighter pressure on the end of the stroke. I think that gives a pretty good illusion of a natural brow. And just filling in any patchiness, combing through areas that might be a bit too chunky or blocky. And I think that'll give me just enough time to pop on my lashes. These are Anxious Angel by Likely Makeup. And I chose these because they are not winged out. They are very round, meaning they are longest at the center and taper on the ends. I've worn these a bunch of times, so they're really formed to my eyelid shape. The more you wear a pair of lashes, the easier they are to put on. We are just about done here, folks. I just want to put on the finishing touches. Before I do that, let's spray ourselves down. This isn't actually all-nighter. It's actually the Mario Badescu facial spray with aloe, herbs, and rose water. I threw it in this bottle because I had just run out of the all-nighter, and the mist around this bottle kind of sucks. Reuse, folks. Save the planet. Let's throw on some bottom mascara. You really want to load it up. I'm just piling on more brow gel because I can. Using the Milk Kush brow gel in Grind just to darken these up. I do wear a fairly dark wig in the show, so I do like to darken my brows a little bit more. Didn't think I was going to finish this tutorial without freckles, did you? And you don't have to do this step. This is just my own personal stamp, and I feel very naked without them, and it's kind of weird now. And because I don't want them to look too fake, I'm going to just dust over that with a hint of matte bronzer. And that, friends, is the look all complete. You may have noticed that things might look a bit different. It's because actually we have time traveled. It is 2 days after I originally filmed this video. I decided to refilm the outro and intro because the wig I originally used for the intro and outro kind of looked like trash. So I procured / stole the wig I actually wear in the show with permission from my director, of course, just so you can get a better idea of how cute this look actually is. I hope you guys had fun watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this look. I did have a lot of fun designing this, creating it, going through many different versions of it before I landed on this one, and I think you guys can totally have fun with it, and I think looks like this really bring the show into the time period that it is set in. And that is where I leave you today, folks. I gotta run. I'm actually cutting it pretty close today for my call time, so I'm just gonna tell you all the many ways you can help out this channel. You could like this video, you could comment on this video down below what you think of the look, you could subscribe. We are getting up there to 1,000 subscribers. I would love to be there by the end of the year, folks. You can click the Patreon link down below if you have some spare change. Help an artist out once in a while. I truly hope you can't hear my neighbors right now. I really, really hope you can't. And last but not least, you can follow me on other social media. My Instagram is at Madelaide the same way it is spelled here, and my Twitter is at madsuds, which is MADDSUDZ. If you decide to do this look, if you were inspired by this look, please tag me on Instagram. Last but not least, what you can do for me is please be kind and be generous to everyone you meet out there in the world today, including your upstairs neighbors. And hopefully I will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.